What's up, man?
What's up?
We are live.
You didn't go live yet, did you?
Yeah, we did.
Well, I was thinking.
I'm gonna pause it. I'll pause it.
Sound is better.
Yes. So we are back with Kurt, and we are going to discuss Boldenone upon request. Someone requested Boldenone, so we're going to talk about it. But before we do, it's the stuff. Time for the stuffs. Like, subscribe, and share the shit out of this. Spread it like herpes. Speaking of herpes, I'm a medical doctor. If you want me to be your doctor, click the link in the description box. Click the consult option, which is the top option. I can order you blood work. I can read your blood work. I can treat you as a normal HRT clinic would treat you. I also do coaching. My Apex Coaching is the business that Dr. Krita Dodson and I co-own, that we will do your nutrition, your training programming. I will handle all your medical stuff. It's the only place where you can get medical care and coaching in one place, and you have two doctors. It's the best deal in town. You can't beat it. And right now we have it set up so that there's financing options, so you only have to make monthly payments. You will love it. Get started immediately. Now, on with the show. You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit. Warning! This is for entertainment purposes only. Do not take this seriously. This is not medical advice. Although I'm a doctor, I'm not your doctor yet. If you want me to be your doctor, click the link in the description box. But otherwise, this is just for fun, kids. Don't do this at home. And we are back with Kurt Haven, PhD candidate, and we are going to discuss Boldenone.
Equipoise. So I'll try to speak louder, because I know that was an aggravation of people last time. So EQ was discovered in the 40s by SIBA, and they didn't really know what to do with it until a guy named John Ziegler brought them Dianabol to have that manufactured in mass quantity, and they discovered that it was basically the same base chemical. So then they went back to EQ and they started playing with it, and then it took almost another 20 years before they got the production right. I had that in my stories on Instagram. I can send you the link if you want, of the original formulation. So it took a bunch of scientists probably their whole entire career just to figure out how to get EQ correct. And they ended up using that super long ester on it. That seemed to be the way to go. I did a post the other day comparing it to Dianabol. I don't know. Do you want me to go?
Might as well.
Into that? Okay. So you're starting really with the same base molecule. And really what changes the two, I know a lot of people have trouble believing that D-bol and EQ were the same drug. When you alter the carbon 17, which is all the way on the right side, it changes, that structural change changes the function of the drug, right? So that it basically, when you methylate it, it does something called steric hindrance. It basically gets in the way of it working in the liver correctly. So it allows it to be orally available versus EQ is not orally available at all. And it changes basically the way the drug works in the body, right? So it changes the way it turns to estrogen and all of those things too. It's like the common side effects with D-bol, you just won't get with EQ. And that's also part of the metabolites of it, right? You want to get into where EQ goes.
Todd,
you want me to go into you want to talk about, like, so EQ metabolizes into basically 4 metabolites that we know of.
Right.
One is DHB, which has become trendy lately. It's the 5-alpha reduced version. And I guess some labs are isolating this and using this as its own steroid. And then there's 3 others, one ADD, one ATD, and one other I can't remember. But there's 4. And one of them acts as an anti-estrogen, basically. And another one is how it turns to estrogen. So it doesn't I guess similar to what we talked about the other day in the Nandrolone video, when we were talking about percentages of aromatization. I think this is confusing to people. So the literature says it aromatizes at 50% of the rate of testosterone.
So it aromatizes at 2.5% then.
Correct. So testosterone, in theory, aromatizes at 5%. So if EQ aromatizes at 50% of that, that's 2.5%. So it's a much smaller number than people realize. So it's basically insignificant. And then it's not actually based on the structure of EQ, it's not turning into estradiol like D-bol would. It turns into estrone, which is E1, or at least something that's very similar to estrone. There's really no proof whether it's fully estrone or something related, but for the sake of argument,
it's kind of irrelevant because it's just it's not powerful and it's not enough. So it's basically, when you take into consideration it's also an aromatase inhibitor precursor, its net effect on a cycle is to lower the estrogen levels.
Yep. And what's the rate of estrone versus estradiol? Is like 1/10?
Yeah, I thought it was definitely less than a third.
Yeah, so it's very tiny. So it's not something that would typically require an AI, and actually can act similar to an AI when used with testosterone. Usually the standard dose that most guys run is either a 1-to-1 or 3-to-2 testosterone to EQ, depending on the person. I know for me, it would be a slightly higher testosterone. I don't really aromatize much, and if I block too much estrogen, it causes a lot of those common side effects like anxiety.
Right. And you had mentioned to me previously that you feel that the reason why Nandrolone and EQ are rumored to cause anxiety is because there's not enough estrogen present, and that absence of estrogen is what's causing the anxiety. And some people run it different cycles than other people. So when there's a predominance of EQ or Nandrolone as a chief anabolic agent, there's just not enough estrogen present, and so the person's going to have anxiety.
Yeah, and so EQ also has a higher binding affinity to the androgen receptor than testosterone. So the issue that guys can run into as well, again, it's individual, but if you ran more EQ than test and the amounts were high enough where the androgen receptors were saturated, you're going to push test away. So EQ will bind with more affinity and efficacy and basically hog the androgen receptor where testosterone can't get there. So that could be part of it as well, but definitely estrogen. I mean, you and I saw that in that case study, right? Where if someone crashes their estrogen, they suffer from depression and anxiety.
Right. So what's the downsides to EQ being the main driver then? If it's got a higher binding affinity to the androgen receptor, isn't that a good thing? Because it frees up the testosterone to be converted into estradiol and DHT, which is in that situation why you'd be taking test, is not before the androgen receptor activity. That's why you're taking the EQ. The reason why you're taking test in that situation is the metabolites, DHT and estradiol.
Yeah, which is like we talked about in one of the other videos previously. I personally believe the reason to mainly use testosterone in a stack is just to supply those metabolites, not so much to be driving growth, right? You want the EQ would then be the anabolic, ideally. There's obviously some growth that's going to come out of the testosterone, but it's not the primary function there. I would say the downsides of EQ is the hemipoietic effect. So it causes your red blood cell count to go up dramatically and much faster than other steroids. So that's probably the main downside. And subsequently, it's going to put some stress on your kidneys.
So the kidney stress is due to the thicker blood?
I'm guessing through how it's stimulating EPO. It also could be the way it's broken down in the body. And again, the kidney stress, have you seen that in labs that it's causing kidney stress?
No, it's just
I haven't either. The stuff I'm going by is like animal studies and rabbits and various rats and things like that. So it's not to say that it necessarily does, but it's something someone should be mindful of, I would say, if they're going to run EQ.
So aside from the structural change of the methylation at carbon 17, what's the actual difference between D-bol and EQ? I know that it's a myriad of differences, but
As far as like a drug is concerned?
Like we got two identical twins. One's
No.
using
Yeah.
EQ and one's using D-ball. What's the difference?
Well, I mean, D-ball, the effects of D-ball, they're greatly different in effects. So D-ball would cause more water retention, most likely from estrogen. And it doesn't really interact with the androgen receptor versus, Boldenone is most of the effects are mediated through the AR. The AEQ would take a very long time to build up tissue versus D-ball puts on, we'll say weight. I don't really believe a lot of that's tissue, but it'll move the scale really quickly. And it tends to, obviously it's liver toxic. It causes, redness, bloating. You would get probably more immediate strength off D-ball, some neurological and some from just the leverage of the fluid versus EQ is like a slow go, right? Like you'd want to run EQ a minimum of 8 weeks. I would say longer than that, ideally, depending on the dose and the person. How would you run it?
I don't like either drug.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't touch D-ball.
I wouldn't use either drug. I wouldn't suggest someone use either drug. The only point I see to EQ is the collagen.
Okay. Yeah. So it does have stronger collagen effects than even Nandrolone, which is misunderstood, right? A lot of people think that Deca or Nandrolone MPP is going to have the strongest effect on collagen production. Actually, EQ is the highest, where it's at 320 versus.
I thought it was like 340 of EQ versus 240 Nandrolone at 200 milligrams per week of each.
Yeah.
And I think it's collagen type 1, not collagen type 2.
Yep. What else do you want to know about EQ?
That's pretty much it. It's frustrating because whenever I do anything ever, people want to know about these obscure drugs that aren't very good.
Yeah.
And then they don't ever want to stick to what's good. They want to know why they shouldn't use what's bad.
I get that exact same stuff. So I get a lot of requests for really obscure stuff like DHB. Even some more, I get some really, really random requests. You saw the one guy that wanted me to talk about myostatin, inhibitors and stuff like that just doesn't work.
I think they're victims of marketing. And that, yes, there are pro bodybuilders that use EQ, but they don't know why they're using it. They're just using it because their coach tells them to. And their coach doesn't know why he's using it. He just knows that's what somebody else who's a good coach has their people using.
Yeah. I mean, I see it a lot at the pro level at the beginning of a contest prep, probably for the first 8 weeks, and it's generally pulled. Probably to just add some more volume, right? Because you'll get like a fullness out of it. But it's typically pulled, before a show. I don't personally know anyone that runs it into a show. I'm trying to think. You said something else before too about obscure. We were talking about obscure stuff.
Just like the idea of using orals to grow. Like there's just so much bad habits that have never died off.
No, I get a lot of oral.
The arguments are like, oh, Arnold used D-ball, so D-ball is good. And it's like, well, he used D-ball because he didn't use testosterone.
Yeah.
That's why he used D-ball.
And they didn't know, right?
It was an estrogen precursor.
Yeah.
And he looked like shit when he ran it.
Yeah. And we know, right, when he switched to Anavar later in his career, he looked a ton better.
Everybody looked like shit when they ran D-ball. Dorian looked like shit when he ran D-ball. Arnold looked like shit when he ran D-ball. If running D-ball makes you look like shit.
Yeah, I personally don't see any use to using that stuff anymore because we know better. And the theory is the faster the muscle comes on or the weight comes on, the less likely it's going to stay because it's not real tissue, right?
Right,
So
it's water.
You can't really rush that process. I don't think EQ is a fully useless drug, but I think that it has its place. But again, it's not like a first call, right? On a milligram basis, it's as strong as anything else, but it's not going to cause, like you could substitute it into a stack on a milligram basis, right? Like it would be equal to Primobolan in theory, anabolism wise, and you can sub it into a stack in an equal amount. It just would be like a second call thing. It was, I know back in the day, it was the reason why it started being used was because it's very smooth. It has no pain. And the original, the Dianabol, whatever that one brand that was 50 milligrams per cc. So it was really low dose. And guys would use it to cut painful stuff like test propionate, just so there was no pain. And it was, EQ was actually a human grade steroid until the late 70s. It was sold under Piranabol. And then the FDA pulled it, and then it became Equipoise when Fort Dodge took over, when the FDA decided it no longer had a use in humans. And we talked briefly on the Nandrolone video about it being a similar thing to Nandrolone in humans, in that so Nandrolone in humans is like a byproduct of aromatase. So it's in a man, it's the circulating amount is 1/100th of testosterone. So it's found in like a minuscule amount in our blood naturally. EQ is a similar thing in animals. So they found in horses and cattle, I believe sheep as well. It's a similar byproduct of the aromatization process. So it's actually a bioidentical hormone in animals technically, but not in humans. And that's probably explains some of the strange effects that it causes in us. So our body doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I'm just not a fan. This was basically just because someone wanted to hear your take on Boldenone, because they're using it and
They
they
want to
want
just
their bullshit validated rather
okay.
than just accepting that it's not a human steroid, it's an animal
No,
steroid.
no. I mean, and you and I could talk about any of these things. Doesn't matter. You know,
Yeah.
people want to hear. I mean, I'd rather not, like you said before, I'd rather not get into the obscure stuff where there's just no data, because then I'm guessing.
Right,
You
and
know,
that's we didn't talk about Trestolone on the Nandrolone video, so that's something that I'd be interested in learning about, but,
we could
from my
do,
understanding, it's just a toxic waste mess, and that all
yeah.
the
So
weight gain is water weight.
we could do another one on Trestolone. I have firsthand experience with that, like when
Oh,
they were messing around, well, personal, and when they were still looking at it for possible human grade like hormone replacement and what its failures are. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think it's a gigantic progesterone mess, and most of that weight, it comes on really fast, and most of it's just fluid, and it's not significant in estrogen or whatever. But I think we could do a video on Ment if that's their thing.
it's I think that's so obscure even the audience doesn't know what Ment is,
Okay.
but it would probably get ranked on SEO or something because there's not very much information about it, and whatever is
Okay.
information about there, it's most of the steroid educators out there are really emotional, and they don't seem to know anything. Like,
Okay.
they're supposed to be these experts like Dave Crossland, and whenever I watch his videos, he does not seem to really know anything. Yeah,
Well, so a lot of this stuff is not, and you know this being a physician, a lot of this stuff is not public access knowledge, right? Like I have to log into sites to see full studies, to get abstracts, to get chemical structures of things. They don't really want the general public seeing this stuff or knowing how to make it, right?
right,
And also there's just generally no need for most people to see it. It's not going to do you any good to understand to see a chemical structure if
right.
if you're not an
It's
organic
just
chemist.
it's just, it's really disappointing with how much of the videos out there are just emotional nonsense. Like, this is great. I gained so much weight on it. I went up 20 pounds, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what the fuck does that even mean?
No. And
Like,
I
I don't
think,
ever understand what is your gaining weight while you're bulking, like relative to what? Like, did you
yeah,
control your calories? And given a 7-week cycle on 4,020 calories, doing this type of training that you went from 215 to 235, where you did the exact same cycle with a different drug the previous year and only went from 215 to 225. Like, what does I
yeah,
gained
it's
20
not
pounds on
relative.
this drug mean? 20
No. And
pounds relative to what?
yeah, I mean, my experience with it, the first time I used it, I went from, I'm short, I'm 5'7". I went from, let's say, 205 maybe to 236.
That's huge. You gained
But
31 pounds?
I was, I mean, I'm a relatively fast responder to things, and I remember the dose. It was daily. You have to use it daily with the acetate ester. it's got an even shorter half-life than Trenbolone acetate. I don't remember what I used, like a cc a day or something, 3/4 of a cc. It was a larger dose, and I used it solo. And I would say that 90% of that weight came off immediately after. It was like
it's
debulk.
water.
It was
Like
just
I
water.
said originally, it's water retention.
Yeah, like you look massive and you're kind of strong. There's no neural drive, so you don't feel like you're not amped up. It's mellow. So you don't really feel anything. You just are really hungry. It made my appetite really extreme and made me get hypo. So I had to constantly eat. And so, like you just said, I think a lot of that also was my food was out of control. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it's like a first call thing. And I think, like you said, these guys think that there's some magic in these chemicals, and no one, I hate to say no one, most guys that know what they're doing don't touch this stuff, right?
No.
The standards are
know what they're
Primo, Masteron, Nandrolone, perhaps, insulin and GH, and really most experienced guys that are big and muscular and look good, that's all they use. They don't mess around with these weird exotic stuff, looking for fast gains. Like I would put money in the fact that Nick Walker's probably never used Ment, or if he did, it's not something he would currently ever think about.
My understanding is, for the most part, people use Primo and Mass interchangeably, and they use EQ and Deca interchangeably.
Yep. So that came from Dan Duquesne, right? So Dan Duquesne made that statement years ago about, he basically said EQ, he compared EQ to Deca in his first book and said that they were similar, which is funny because chemically they're not similar at all. No, and I don't think effect-wise they're similar. And then he recanted that.
Okay, both of them, they don't really aromatase.
No.
They both have increased collagen synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
They don't convert to DHT. Right? So that one is relatively dries out a cycle, and one amplifies the wetness of a cycle.
Yeah.
But really, they're not that dissimilar from each other.
No, I mean, the result might not be.
And also, when you would deploy them is the same when you want collagen synthesis.
Yeah, or used as, I mean, the only deployment difference I could see is, like I said, you could see there's one of the top pro level coaches out there typically uses it in his cycles right like 8 weeks out from a show, like an Olympia, and then he pulls it. That would be the only difference, is you would typically not use Deca there. Maybe you would use like 100 milligrams or 200 for joint stuff, but I don't know anyone who would diet.
Well, the joint stuff's the collagen.
Yeah, I'm saying, but the misunderstanding is that they use for Nandrolone and not Boldenone.
No, the point of the Nandrolone, you use Tren when you're cutting for 3 different benefits that don't really apply to Nandrolone, because you wouldn't use Nandrolone in the off season, and really anytime you use Nandrolone, you might as well just use EQ. So EQ can be a sub out for Nandrolone or Primo, but it's not as clean as Masteron. Pardon?
Yeah. I would say, yeah. And I would say, yeah, I mean, you could sub. I would say side effect wise, I would say EQ is probably friendlier than Nandrolone for most things, right? Like you don't get the same mental problems, possible sexual stuff. The only time I've ever seen sexual stuff with EQ is if you take an AI with it and not enough test, you'll crash your estrogen. And then, yeah, obviously nothing's going to work, but it's, I would think if someone had to pick between the two, I don't know, it's kind of up in the air. I'd probably go with EQ just because Nandrolone is not always the friendliest drug. Mentally.
Right. I just don't think anyone should use either of them.
No.
But in the event where someone was only trying to drive collagen synthesis, then I could see a point of EQ. I don't really see a point of the Nandrolone.
Well, what's the collagen synthesis on Primobolan? It's up there.
It is?
Yeah.
Do you want me to pause it and you can look?
Yeah, let me look.
All right.
Are you recording?
No, I just restarted the recording.
Cool. Okay, so we talk about collagen production, right? And what really has the most effect in order. So Boldenone at 3 milligrams per kilogram increases procollagen 3, they're claiming, by 340% in 1 week.
Right.
Nandrolone,
3 milligrams per kilogram, not 2 milligrams per kilogram.
No, 3 milligrams per kilogram. Right. Nandrolone at the same dose, 3 milligrams per kilogram, increases procollagen 3 by 270%. So you're looking at 340 versus 270.
Right.
Primobolan comes in number 3, but the dose has to be higher. At 5 milligrams per kilogram, it increases collagen synthesis by 180% in 1 week.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool. And then you have Winstrol, which is funny because everyone thinks it's necessarily drying your joints out. That produces collagen through RNA, and the percent is you got to go to other links. And then Anavar, and then estrogen obviously does it as well, and HGH.
Testosterone isn't on the list?
No, because my understanding is testosterone actually decreases it, right? But the estrogenic effects of testosterone increase it. So kind of like nets even. I think that's just the body's way of maintaining some sort of homeostasis. Like it doesn't need you producing tons of collagen, it wants you exactly at the rate that it's expecting. But yeah, so Boldenone is more at an equal dose to Nandrolone. It produces more collagen, 340% versus 270. So I'm not really sure what the use then in Nandrolone is. If someone's only using it for joint health, Boldenone is probably a slightly better choice.
That's what I guess my conclusion was earlier, and I guess it wasn't as clear what I was saying in previous things because I've always known that EQ outperformed Nandrolone for joints, maybe going back 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, you must have been early on that, though. That's not like common knowledge.
No. And no one would ever listen, so I just stopped saying it after a while.
Yeah. So I think the other interesting thing is, so currently Boldenone is still under it. We're still studying it now as a possible replacement for Trenbolone in cattle for a growth additive.
Now, someone asked a question in the last video about Tren acetate and the prostaglandin response.
Mm-hmm.
Is that specific to Tren?
At that level, yes. And specifically to acetate. That's why you would get that's like we talked about, that's why you get the cough from acetate. And you notice in a xanthate, it tends to cause heartburn. So that's the same PGE2 prostaglandin response that causes heartburn, but it's just manifesting entirely different because of the ester.
All right. So is there other ways to elicit prostaglandin E2? I had answered this question before you saw it, and I just said arachidonic acid or omega-6 fatty acids.
Yeah. I mean, steroid wise, yeah, I don't, there's probably some level, but nothing I think that compares to the trend. Like you said, it would be more diet related than anything else.
So pro-inflammatory fats
basically
lead to the prostaglandin family, which is bad for your heart disease. And
well,
of course,
as long as there's a balance. As long as there's a balance between 3 and 6, like you're supposed to have, it's fine.
But the balance is like 20-1, which is
now, yeah, we could do a whole video on that too. I mean, that's part of the reason why people are in such poor health.
We should cover more than just anabolics. We should cover, even though this is the anabolic university.
Well, food is
that doesn't
anabolic.
necessarily mean anabolic steroids. I mean, food's anabolic and training's anabolic too.
Yeah, I mean, food is probably the most anabolic by definition, right? Can't really grow tissue from nothing.
No.
And that's another thing I think that goes along with, not using Ment and D-ball. Those guys haven't realized the importance of food yet either, right? They think there's some secret drug out there that's going to pile on weight.
It's the most irritating question I've ever gotten is how much weight is this going to put on me a week?
I don't know how much you eat.
How much you're going to eat? It's like they're literally that stupid. They think that a syringe is going to add pounds to them when the syringe only has a couple milliliters, a milligrams worth of solution in it. How can milligrams turn into kilograms? It can't. It's just basic thermodynamics.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I think that the easiest way people can understand it is your limiting factor outside of genetics and how big you can get is how much you can eat. Right. Like Ronnie Coleman talks about that. He was eating a ton and then his coach had him eat more and then he grew more. Right. I mean, that's why Paul shoves the amount of food that I have to eat is absolutely disgusting, but it works. I was stuck at a weight for a long time.
Right. And that's one of my things is I've been growing slowly, but I'm eating the same 4,100 calories for the past 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, so you're probably used to it now.
Well, it's actually gotten harder to get in. I've got more heartburn and I've got less appetite. So,
You could always diet a little bit, and then I hate to use the word mini cut because I'm not sure what that even means, but you could always diet a little bit and then bring it back up.
I don't even think I'm that fat. Let me get your opinion. Let's see what this light looks like.
Oh, no, you don't need to diet. No, that would be dumb. You don't need to diet.
Right. So I was 213 yesterday.
Oh, cool. We're the same weight. I was 213 this morning.
We're fat twins.
What's your height? You're bigger than me. What are you,
5'4"?
Okay, I'm 5'7", so you got me.
Yeah, theoretically, yeah. On stage, I'll look bigger, but in person, I probably would look smaller.
Yeah, debatable. Cool, man. Anything else about
EQ? No, man, that should cover it. That should cover it.
Cool.
So we'll just pick another topic. Are you free tomorrow too?
Sure.
All right,
yeah,
cool.
whatever people want. Yeah,
we'll
whatever people want.
All right, guys. To get a hold of Kurt's book, check in the description box. Also, to get Kurt for a coach, his link is also in the description box. For me, if you want my medical help, or if you have want questions answered, if you want my help as a coach, my partner is Dr. Karina Dodson. That's also going to be a link in the description box. I'll make it really clear for you guys, like in the last few videos. You guys just remember that we're covering the drug. Doesn't mean we endorse the drug. That I'm pretty much just a fan of test, mast, GH.
Yep.
And people may not understand that, but just check those videos because I'm really clear. And I shot a video that's for the How to Grow series, pro steroid cycle, that clears it up a lot. And I'm going to reshoot it because it took too long. It was like 58 minutes and I repeated myself a lot. I'm going to shoot it in 30 minutes this time. It's going to be better. All right. Let's talk to you guys tomorrow. All right, Kurt, I'll talk to you tomorrow too.
Awesome, man. I'll see you.